I'm sure most of us know or have had the misfortune of witnessing the infamous Three Guys One Hammer video. It's a horrible piece of content, from the audio that can be heard to the brutality that's seen. Easily up there as one of the worst videos on the internet. Committed by teens that are considered to be evil personified. And there was another teen named Alexander Hanza, though he didn't take anyone's life, but he was involved in the robberies at the time. Alexander only served a 9-year sentence for his involvement with the robberies. But then there was also a fourth teenager named Danila Kozlov, who isn't known as much, but they were all friends. Danila gave evidence against this group for a lighter unrelated sentence, and with a wealthy and connected family behind them, this fourth suspect was successfully able to vanish from this entire situation, with some claiming that Kozlov relocated to Germany. And with the notorious police corruption at the time in the Ukraine, it will never be known if Danila Kozlov took any innocent lives while being with this group of teenage psychopaths. So focusing back on the main two guys, Viktor Sayenko and Igor Suprinyuk. Essentially, these teens are filmed going on a crime spree of, taking lives. They are seen in the woods taking the life of a man, who was also battling cancer at the time. But not long ago, before this video was filmed, they had taken the lives of many others. First, it began as just robberies, but then at some point, they just started taking people's lives right off the street, and they didn't have an ounce of remorse about it. However, the other videos that they filmed were never released to the public. But one video was enough to prove how absolutely evil these boys were. The video is worse than you can imagine. About 21 victims have had their lives taken by these teens, but there's claims that that count is even higher. I'm sure you've had that one friend in school who watches this type of content, who might ask you at the lunch table about it, at least during the times when graphic videos like this were a topic of conversation in school. If you haven't seen it, just be thankful. Just don't go watching it, it's horrible. I'm sure someone's gonna go type it in right now, but just please don't do it. Fight the urge. But that's besides the point of this video. You see, it's been a long time since there's been an update on these guys, and I've spent a while trying to gather something new on them. And we need to consider the conflict in the Ukraine that's still going on. A lot of information on prisons aren't as easily accessible, especially during these times, because we know that Igor and Viktor were imprisoned back in 2007 in Dnipro, Ukraine. Dnipro was the fourth largest city in the east of Ukraine and is located in the Dnepropetrovsk Oblast. When it comes to this topic, most locals would prefer to avoid it and not talk about it. But what is the fate of these teenage psychos, who by now are middle-aged? Are they still imprisoned, or were they conscripted to be soldiers? Well, despite the war, normal life continues on in this country. People still go out to eat, they still go to the gym, they work and go to school, but things don't really feel quite the same anymore for obvious reasons. And in this area of the region that the boys were last imprisoned, although stable, aerial attacks have become more frequent, but many people have simply adjusted to this new reality. But week after week, there's reports of missile attacks that are destroying the infrastructure of the city, such as the railroad systems, among other things. According to Dmytro Yagunov, a Ukrainian member of the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, a man who's been evaluating the prison system for over 20 years, he confirms that the Ukraine lost control of over 30 prison facilities, with the biggest number of Ukraine prisons located in the east and the south of the country. There's been a steady decline in military numbers and recruitments as well. And now, the country recently rolled out a new interesting bill. Around a month ago, a bill was passed in Ukrainian parliament that allowed the use of mobilizing convicts in an attempt to boost their military. So basically turning inmates into soldiers. In exchange, the inmates receive lighter sentences and early releases. They're trained out on the field and put through a boot camp, if you will, and are taught extensively how to use and manage weapons, among other things. Now, can you imagine these psychopaths as trained soldiers? I personally wouldn't prefer this outcome. Are they even competent enough to be trained as loyal soldiers? My answer is probably not. It's very much obvious where their allegiance lies. If you know, you know. If not, it rhymes with Mr. Kinda, I think. But with the crimes that they've committed and over 21 lives lost, there's absolutely no way that they've been rehabilitated into normal civilians, especially in the harsh conditions that many Ukrainian prisons are in. But luckily, this new bill also comes with a few exclusions. Prisoners with the most serious violent crimes are unable to take part in this. So those who've committed SA, violent ones who have unalived people, and anyone with a serious crime basically. But who's to say the country won't push this limit if times were to get extremely desperate? They've already raised the age of conscription. And this doesn't apply to regions where Russia has taken control, obviously. So what really happens to these Ukrainian prisoners if Russia were to annex said prison? Things become more blurry on Russia's side, but most times detainees are relocated to the country that's occupying the area. You see, while the Ukraine is excluding violent and serious offenders from being conscripted, Russia is not. Apart from the Wagner Group, which has recruited thousands upon thousands of Russian inmates to fight, there is also a so-called volunteer battalion that Russia has been utilizing, in which Ukrainian prisoners are persuaded into fighting against their own country in exchange for a lesser sentence and even freedom. So is there a possibility that these psychos are fighting in either side of the war? Yes, but I'd say the odds of that are low. Aside from the frontline cities being a danger, specifically in the east and the south, most parts of the Ukraine are still very much stable. Don't let the media and the news fool you that it's nothing but a rubble. This only applies to certain parts. People still travel to the Ukraine on a regular basis. But as for the exact whereabouts of these psychopaths, well, that answer is a bit more difficult for me to find. Though this isn't 100% verified, an old article states that Sapruniuk was transferred to a wing in Dnipro prison for inmates with life sentences. The conditions in this wing are even more severe, apparently, while Sayenko was placed in a prison in the industrial city of Kryvyi Rih, which isn't that far from Dnipro. Two cities that are, for the most part, stable, all things considered. We can only hope that these two are still behind bars somewhere and not out on the field having any type of freedom. Though interesting enough, I went through a lot of Ukrainian videos and communities about this subject, and I got some pretty conflicting answers. I think it's just the basement-dwelling fanboys that are spreading this rumor that one of them got freed. I'm legitimately shocked that these guys have fans. But that's just how life goes, because even Jeffrey Dahmer has fans. Some guy said Sayenko unalived himself last year, but there's not too much info to back this claim up. But the general consensus that I got was indeed that these two guys are still locked up. They cannot legally be conscripted by their own government for a more lenient sentence, but if they were to somehow fall into neighboring hands, then who's to really say? So for now, we will just have to wait and see. The third guy, Alexander Hanza, reportedly has a wife and children and is living peacefully. Anyway, I did my best to offer the most likely theories. I pretty much grew up around the shock video era, I guess you could say. You know, the early 2000s when we really weren't used to seeing these type of videos. And when you're young, you kind of want to watch things that you're not supposed to see. But nowadays, I feel like everyone's so desensitized. But yeah, this story really stuck with me, so I wanted to discuss it a little bit. There's all kinds of horrible shock videos out there nowadays. From the cartels to all the conflicts and wars going on. I heard the cartels have like ultra 4K quality cameras now, so that's pretty horrible news. It's all just a mess, you know? Anyway, I do appreciate you checking out this video, but hopefully this video was able to clear some things up and maybe provide you more info that you didn't know about. That's about it for now, and I'll catch you in the next video.